Okay, we're ready to start. Coolio. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Patrick Stafford, and this is Jane Cantwell. So today I'm going to be the master of the ceremony, and Jane is going to be the chair of the ceremony. So today we have a few speakers. I myself am a past graduate of WIT, and so I'm here as kind of representative of WIT as a past alumni, and it's kind of nice because I won an award in my fourth year first semester to design the hub for Waterford Central Library, and so it was a pretty good award to get. I got a 4-week internship with Martin Gaffney, which was really good, and I got to work with Dr. Fiona Dowling, who was my head lecturer. That was really good. And so you can see the hub, you can see the banners. It kind of worked out well. It was a nice project, and I got to do 2 extra weeks for free in Berlin. That was fun too. So today we've a kind of cool lineup. Some of the speakers are like Jane Cantwell. She's the chair of Waterford Central.
The City and County Library.
Yeah, Waterford City and County. Yeah. And then we've also got Dr. Susan Flynn, which is there. How are you? And she is the head of the Department of Arts, and also Margaret Tynan, the Growth Hub, which is on the live stream. Is she? Can she see us? Oh, how are you? There you go. Cool. Also, we have some other interesting speakers, which are Professor Brenda Murphy, who is in the Malta University and is the former director of the De-Bono Institute of Design Thinking and presently researches gender and inclusion, and she'll be doing a talk on design thinking, if I'm correct. We've also got Sarah Bowie, who is an illustrator and designer, who is actually now based in Waterford, but you're from Dublin, are you? Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. And she's a really good illustrator. She's won a few awards, and she has a broad range of creative awards for work aimed across print and virtual platforms. Best known since 2019 for her illustration material for COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 pandemic, which we want to forget about. Also, we have Gerard Whelan, who is founder and creative managing director of Brand Central, which is based in Dublin and Copenhagen. Is this true?
Well, I do a lot of work in Copenhagen.
Okay, cool. So yeah, these will all be interesting. Then we've Mckenzie Royal, who is the former IDI president, which is pretty cool, and founder of The Big Idea, founder of Y Design, www.ydesign.ie, IDI, mindovermatter.ie. She currently sits on the National Design Forum, a government-led initiative to drive Ireland's capability and reputation as a source of design innovation. We're going to get those, kind of 5 talks, and then we're going to have a break. We also have Dr. Fiona Dowling, who is not going to talk, but she is here. Who is my head lecturer. And we also have the current 4th-year students who are going to be presenting their work later on, which will be interesting. And so, yeah, it's looking good. It's actually looking good. It's looking good. Okay. So Jane is going to start off with a quick talk.
Just a quick welcome, that's
quick
all.
welcome.
Thank you very much, Patty.
I'll give you this, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. I'll bring it out a bit.
Yeah, too. Thanks. Thanks for that introduction, and we were so delighted with the work you did on that piece. It's absolutely marvellous.
Thank you, yeah.
So just to say, I'd like to welcome you all, and thank you very much for coming, and a special welcome to our students and their families and friends, and all the friends and families who have supported them, because it's been a very difficult few years. We're really lucky here in Waterford. We are now a university city, and we're really lucky to be able to use Central Library to launch this final year degree showcase. And now we have 3 floors here in the library with all this wonderful work from your students. This is the first time that the final year degree showcase has been hosted outside of the university, and we are delighted to be able to use the city as our canvas and our test bed. Bringing creativity to the heart of the city is what every university aspires to. I'd like to pay a huge thanks to librarians Sinead O'Higgins and Lorraine Boyle from Waterford Libraries, and to all of the South East Technical University design team. Dr. Fiona Dowling in particular, has been breathing and sleeping this show for the last few weeks. Thank you, Fiona. And finally, to mention the work, the brilliant, imaginative, original ideas that we think will inspire and spark off all our imaginations. So thank you to you all for that. Just to finish, just to say the poet Mary Oliver has some words of real wisdom that I think are perfect for design students and for anyone creating or admiring creations. She writes, "Open your life and keep some room in your heart for the unimaginable." I think those are wise words because we don't know what the future holds, and the last few years have shown us that, but we can approach it with curiosity and with openness. I suppose I've been really inspired by the openness of this teaching team and these students, and I hope you will be too. So thank you all and enjoy your day. Thank you. Thanks, Paddy. So do you need somebody else up here now?
Yeah. So, that was good. So we're going to start off. Our first speaker is Professor Brenda Murphy. Oh, no, sorry. That's Dr. Susan Flynn.
Hi everyone, and thanks for coming. I'm really delighted to be here to represent SETU, the South East Technological University. It's a really exciting time for us because our first graduates from a university, and Waterford is a university city, which is something we've been waiting for a really long time, so it's really, really exciting. I really want to thank Brenda Murphy and Mckenzie Royal and Sarah Bowie and Gerard Whelan for sharing your brilliant expertise and showing that real openness and joy to be here and share your work with students who really are the future and the future of design. So I started my academic life as a semiotician, someone who looks at signs and their meaning and pictures and images and words and what they mean to people. And I spent a long number of years exploring culture and the effects that that has on people. So to be here and look at all this amazing work over 3 floors is really, really, really inspiring to me. I'm thinking of a great line from Pablo Picasso when he said, "You learn the rules like a pro so you can break them like an artist." And I think that that's really really means something here when I see that the work that you're doing and how you've been able to learn through making mistakes, which is how we all learn. Even at my very old age, I'm still making mistakes and learning from them. So I just would end by saying, please continue to break the rules and to shape our future through images and messages and meaning, because culture is everything. And we'll have nothing going forward if we don't have a really vibrant and challenging culture that makes us think in new and diverse ways. So well done, everyone, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from all our brilliant speakers and to looking at more of your great work throughout this afternoon and this evening too. So thanks and enjoy.
Nice, thank you. That was brilliant. That was Dr. Susan Flynn. And so yeah, that was Dr. Susan Flynn. And we're going to just introduce Margaret Tynan first.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that was coming.
No bother. Yeah, so that was Dr. Susan Flynn. That was really nice. And now we've got Margaret Tynan from the Growth Hub. She's a partner of the Growth Hub. She's right here. Can we get her on full screen?
Once she starts talking.
Okay, hi Margaret. Hello Margaret. If you can.
Hello everybody, I disappeared there because I just had to unmute myself, so it's not as natural when you're in this virtual environment. I just want to say hello to everybody again because I can see the audience, which is lovely. And I want to welcome you all to the Growth Hub here at SETU. So the Growth Hub is a brand new project which was kicked off in SETU in October. We opened our doors in October. It's a government-funded project which will run for the next 4 years. And we're doing it in tandem with our partners in TU Dublin. So there's a Growth Hub at TU Dublin and a Growth Hub at SETU. This room that you can see behind me is our Imaginarium. And this is where we encourage students to come together, to bounce around ideas, and to see if they can come up with new and novel ways of doing things. So one of the things we've done as part of this project is to create a collaborative working space, which is very, very different in look and feel to many of the other traditional classrooms and lecture halls that we have here in SETU. The remit and the aim of our project, as the students well know, is to support students' entrepreneurial potential. So any student that has a desire to work for themselves or has a desire to set up a business, we want to be able to support them. And in the beginning, that desire simply starts as curiosity. So we will bring in people to share their experiences and to be able to act as role models for students. So one of the very first speakers that we had in here was Miriam Dunn, who came in to talk to students about the challenges of setting up new initiatives in the cultural sector. So we embrace science and technology, we embrace social enterprise, we embrace cultural enterprise. We opened our doors, as I said, in October, and it's at that stage that I reached out to Dr. Fiona Dowling for a little bit of help. And I asked her, would it be possible for the design students to help establish the Growth Hub brand within C2, so that our students would actually understand what we're about and what it is that we can do. So the work that you will see as part of the exhibition is the work that the students have done to help students in SETU understand the purpose of the Growth Hub as an open, inclusive, inviting space where we can give advice, we can provide training, and we can provide signposting to people that can help them on their journey. So, you know, I encourage you, when you're looking at the work that the students have done, to appreciate the great variety of ideas. And here in the Growth Hub, we were absolutely thrilled with the work that the students actually developed for us. So, as with everybody else, I'm really looking forward to listening to all the guest speakers today. And thank you very much for the time and effort that you put into the work for the Growth Hub here at SETU.
Thanks, Margaret. That was brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so that was Margaret Tynan of the Growth Hub, as you can see. That was the best stream I've ever seen. So now we're going to have a talk from Professor Brenda Murphy of the Malta University. And she's the former director of the De-Bono Institute of Design Thinking and presently researches on gender and inclusion. So, yeah, here we go.
I'm not going there till I see my presentation on screen. There's an exit here somewhere. Does
that look like yours?
That's fine. No, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll go with that.
How about that one?
That looks right. Good 8, thank you. Perfect, thank you. So, hi, all the way from Malta, huh? Yeah, come out, visit us, please. We'd love to have you all. We've had a bilateral agreement with SETU since 2008, and we have a student mobility system in place. So, that's not good. It's coming back. So we've had traffic between University of Malta and SETU for quite some time now. If I say WIT, I'll put money in the swear jar, okay? Or I'll be taken outside and shot. It's about branding. SETU is about branding. What you guys have been doing this year is about creating images. And I was really excited to hear another semiotician was in the room, because that is where my heart lies. And it is through semiotics, I don't know how many of you have studied semiotics, but through semiotics, you're nodding your heads, that you unravel and you excavate ideology. You get to dust away the first order of meaning, you know, that Barthes talks about. And you get to dust away the second order of meaning, the second order signification. And there's the myth lying underneath, the ideology. And that ideology can be a political ideology, it can be a religious ideology, an educational ideology, a design ideology, but an ideology nonetheless that we challenge, because that's where the meaning is lying. And the work that you've been doing is going to be a challenge, because you now have the tools as you go out into the world and become the creative designers of our material culture. You are going to be recreating and challenging the kinds of norms, the kinds of ideologies that are rooted in our everyday practices. So you're going to get a chance to sit and look at a piece of design and say, but where are all the faces? Why aren't there faces? We're not chopping off people's heads anymore, as Jean Kilbourne talks about. We're not dismembering bodies, as we do to women all the time in advertising. We're not going to hypersexualize young girls, as we see in advertising. Brian McNair talks about pornographic culture that has become mainstream. We can pull back on all of those images because we're aware of what's going on, and we have the tools to interrogate. So we interrogate. So that's my first little spiel. So when Fiona asked me to talk today, my first title was Creativity and Equality, and Equality and Creativity. But that didn't feel right. So I thought I'd go with the title of the event, which is your iKon Forum 2022, and pause by saying, wow, well done. You survived. You survived 3 years or 4? 4 years, of which 2 were a global pandemic. We all did. Thank God we're all here. And you have produced something amazing as a result of that. You've had to work from home, you've had to work remotely, but you have worked. And your institution has worked with you, and you've produced the most amazing stuff. I looked at it earlier, and it's just mind-blowing. So congratulations. Today I am going to give you a menu. We didn't get out much during COVID to eat. Today's menu is looking at design thinking, first of all, because in my previous life I worked with the De-Bono Institute for the design development thinking. I was there for 8 years. As a senior lecturer, as director, as developer of new MSCs in thinking and design thinking. I then moved, I was poached, I was interpolated over to, by our rector. We wanted to set up a new department for gender studies, and I thought, well, that's where my heart now lies. So we said goodbye to all the fantastic people at the De-Bono Institute, and I went over to the Department of Gender Studies as part of one of the founding members. So I brought with me all of my interest and knowledge around images and material culture, and relocated with a new focus, if you like, which was looking at gender equality, looking at inclusion, looking at belonging, and looking at the cultures that suffice to support and create those spaces. So today I will look at a quick look at design thinking as tools and practices, a nod to De-Bono and his thinking tools, and then we'll land on your designers or creatives' remit as you go out into the world and hold identity and inclusion and creativity as central to your everyday practices, but especially, hopefully, holding gender equality as part of your everyday practice as front and center. So bear with me, I hope I don't overrun. Somebody will shout at me and tell me to stop, I presume, or unplug my mic, because I could stay here all day, you know that. So, and apologies in advance, I did my best to be as creative as possible with my screen, but I think I'm in the wrong room. So let's stop first of all and think a little bit about design thinking. You've already done this, I'm sure you've done it a million times, it's coming out your ears at this stage. But when we stop and think about design thinking in relation to those 4 words, design, identity, creativity, and inclusion, they're 4 of my favorite words, because we are synthesizing them in order to think about creative processes, in order to think about the way we can challenge, the way we can, as De-Bono would say, create an interruption in order to think again. One of his favorite analogies is that you're walking down a road and suddenly the road is blocked and you have to think about what else you're going to do. That interruption is going to make you think again. So little strategies when you're sitting at your computer or your canvas or wherever it is that you're working. It's about going out and creating those interruptions for yourself when you want to get your thought flow and to get back into, as Csikszentmihalyi says, into flow. So when we move on then and think about the design and thinking tools that are available to us, I'm just going to hit on a couple of things here. As your mantra in your working day practices, remind yourself, I can share this slideshow with you all if you wish. Remember there's 5 elements to the design thinking process. Be human-centered. We're talking about human beings in their fullest and most exciting. So when you're creating an image of a human being, think about the respectful way that you would do that, the inclusive way that you would do that, to create a culture of belonging. Be creative and playful. Life's no fun without a little bit of play. Be iterative, be collaborative, and think about the prototype when you are preparing. You have 3 phases that you have to think about. So you've got five elements, 3 phases. You've got your inspiration phase when you're wandering around, jogging, swimming, drinking gin, whatever it is that you do to get your creative juices flowing. Then you have your ideation where you're sitting down maybe with your pen, or you're sitting down with your finger in the sand and you're moving the images around, and then you have your implementation. So you know that there are those 3 stages, 3 phases. And then finally you have the 5 stages, if you like, where you're empathizing, you're thinking about your users' needs, putting them first. Then you're defining and you're stating your users' needs and problems. Then you've got your ideation, which is the fun part, where you're challenging the assumptions, you're creating the ideas, you're producing the prototype in the 4th stage to create the design solutions, and you're testing. And if you're going through those sequential moments, then you're probably ticking all the boxes and you're probably on the right track and you're going to produce something quite amazing at the end. So of course we couldn't talk about design tools without mentioning Edward De-Bono. And what he said in this quote is quite interesting. He said, "I've learned in my research that the tool approach to thinking is very effective." So tools are useful. We don't sit in a vacuum and suddenly, like all the great artists of the world that we imagine, sitting in angst in their attics. We don't sit in the attic with angst, ideally. Maybe we did during COVID, but hopefully we don't anymore. So when we're thinking about our thinking, our design thinking, there are tools, just as there are tools with everything else. And this involves the deliberate use of thinking tools in a systematic way in order to address a particular problem or issue. And there are many, many tools. You've probably heard of them. You probably use them. So forgive me for teaching you guys how to suck eggs, but I'm just going to remind you of some of the tools that are out there. Your color chart, if you like, or your set of crayons that you can dip into. You've got the 6 thinking hats, which are profound. They're so powerful. If you can get everybody on the right page and you know how you're going to facilitate them. Lateral thinking, what De-Bono was most famous for. The DATT, the direct attention thinking tools, they're my favorite. They're great to work with kids. In fact, we'll come to them in a minute. Simplicity, the CORT tools, and focus on facilitation. So we'll come back to them. So that's, if you were not sure of the 6 thinking hats, that's what they look like. And the idea is you can be in a meeting and you ask everybody to hold on to the first idea. Everybody wears their first hat. They might want to start off with their judgment hat and think about the issue in relation to that set of thinking tools, instead of having one person going, "Oh, I don't like the sound of that," and reacting emotionally, and another person sitting and thinking, "Oh, what about?" and having a creative moment. You get everybody in the same space for thinking, and you get to progress the thinking, at least in a little bit of a sort of a controlled way. And you don't lose the thoughts, and you don't interrupt the flow of the ideas. So everybody sits with the moment of judgment, for example, where you're being the logical negative. Then you sit with the blue hat, where you're thinking about controlling processes. Then you sit with the green hat, so everybody's free for all for creativity. Then you all sit and hold on to your yellow hat. You don't actually physically have to wear the hats, but it's great fun if you do. Then your yellow hat, which would be your logical positive, so you're thinking of solutions, not problems. The emotional hat, where everybody has a chance to really, really touch with their feelings and think about how this is impacting on them, or how it might impact on the user, or how it might impact on the client. And your white hat, which is the neutral objectivity. Now, I ran them in order from here to here, but obviously you can use them as and when and how. Or you might just decide you want to use 1 or 2. And then this is the +1. This is an additional one, which is the royal hat, is the owner. That's the invested person. That might be the client, it might be the CEO, it might be the person who has the funding, but it's definitely the person who's holding a little bit more power than the rest of you. And it's really important to know that, because power is never equal, sadly, and we know that, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about gender equality. So when you think about the relation of power with the decision making, factor that in, because it is important too. It's just another one for your mental whiteboard. That's a little bit of an extra description. I won't spend more time, because I suspect, I don't know, anybody keeping time? I'm good, thank you.
10 minutes.
How many?
10 minutes.
Grand. Oh, slow down. Have a little nap. Okay, and that's another slide, just again taking you through some of the variations and how you might use them in a different space. He loved Post-it notes. In fact, I was going to have an image of a Post-it note, because some of the activities, especially when you're doing some of the games in the DAT, will require copious amounts of Post-it notes. You'll have them filling walls, you'll have them filling chairs, you'll have them all over people if necessary. Of the DATT tools, of which there are 10, my two favourite are the PMI and the OPV. I'll just settle on them for a second. The PMI is the plus minus interesting. If you've ever worked with kids or young adults, PMI is great. You get to sit with whatever topic it happens to be, and you ask them to think about the issue in terms of the plus, the minus, and the interesting. Now, we all do this all the time. We do the pros and cons list in our heads. We're making big decisions or small decisions. But when you sit and formally engage with the PMI, it allows you to get all those Post-it notes up on the wall, because everybody's been writing down their ideas and sticking them up. So you have all the kids going over and putting their positive, their plus stuff over one side, their minus stuff over another, and then they're interesting at the end. And they make such amazing reading. You suddenly have a moment where the kids have stopped, or the adults, have stopped and thought about the interesting aspect of whatever it is. It could be the Russian-Ukrainian war, it could be COVID, it could be anything. But when you get them to talk about the interesting aspect, you really get flow. And then the second point of my favourite of the DATT tools is the OPV, which is the other people's view. And for me, that's really important when we're thinking about equality and inclusion and belonging, because in order to understand the other person's view, the chances are, and I know the landscape has changed, but we know that the chances are in the creative industries that it is predominantly, as in most industries, male-driven at the top, and as you move down through that triangle, you find that there are more women lower down the decision-making positions within the organisation. So the chances are, in the boardroom and decision-making level within those organisations, it isn't primarily male voices and male minds. Now, that's nobody's fault, per se. I'm not looking to those men and saying, aha, you're the bad guys. Hello, Harvey, get out of here, because they're not. They're not the Harveys. The Harveys are somewhere else. The people who are holding the power didn't even know they were holding the power, but they're holding it. So what we're doing is we're asking, I remember a very interesting scenario where I was working in London in a design studio, and we had a situation where, it wasn't my personal experience, anecdotal to me, where an advertising agency was discussing a tampon advertising that they were planning on researching. They were doing the situation analysis for it. And the only woman in the room was the secretary. Now, we're going back 30 years. Wouldn't happen today, I hope. But it meant that there was no female voice in the room around anything, but especially around a very specifically female topic, which was the advertising of tampons and how best to talk to women about their menstrual periods and how best to be comfortable during that time. So OPV is a really nice one to keep in your pocket, in your back pocket, in your front pocket, in your breast pocket, close to your heart, because it helps you to really interrogate the semiotic meanings when you're coming back to the images that you're being asked to produce or the images that you're challenging in order to do something different. So maybe that's the edge you can give your client. When your client comes in with the sad old hackneyed images of the disembodied woman or the hypersexualized woman or the objectified woman, where she becomes the product. You know, she's immersed and morphed, and it happens. It's happening every day. We know this from our research. That you could then turn around and say, well, actually, here's some data, here's some other data, here's some statistics, and here's an OPV, and here's what we found in our focus groups when we talked to the women. And actually, maybe we will do something different, and maybe you'll get a different response, and maybe you'll get a different reaction. So OPV is very, very powerful. I think this is the third course. So we've had our starters and main course. And this is dessert, which is always the best, I think. So what's your artist or your designer's remit? Well, we're holding on to the words identity, creativity, and inclusion. And we're looking at then secondary, not secondary though, but alongside that, gender equality and the challenge for creative solutions. And when I think about you guys going out into the world, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that there is going to be change. I'm hopeful that you've been trained in a new way and you're going to do things differently. And you're going to question what you do and how you do it. And that's thanks to amazing people like Fiona and the institution and yourselves, most importantly. So to those of you who are working in the creative industry, I would say that you are mandated to challenge and to make sense of the world for the rest of us, for those of us who don't manage to do it quite so well or with such skill. And I binge read Jodi Picoult during COVID. I'm now on the last one that she's ever written. I don't think I can read her again for a long time. But this was one of my favorite quotes that leapt out at me. And she said in her book, A Spark of Light, it's not a heavy quote, guys, it's a light quote. I'm not quoting Althusser here. Jodi Picoult said, that was what artists did. They arranged the unarrangeable into something that made sense. And for me, that just meant, yes, that's what you guys will do. You'll go out and you will rearrange into sense. So then, back down to the really important stuff in my book. When we think about those three words, identity, creativity, and inclusion, we think about those moments of identity that we carry with us, that are drenched through us, like the ink that's poured over the freshly cut piece of wood. It's indelible. It's part of our very core. We carry it with us, we wear it, we own it, we hold it. And our identities are multifaceted. They're around our gender, our race, our class, our culture, our religion, etc., etc. We know that. We know that there's lots of different identities playing on us all the time. I know I'm very conscious of my hybrid identity when I'm in Malta because I carry with me my Irishness, but also my Malteseness. But I've lived there so long, they allowed me to become Maltese too. You know, this is, for God's sake, she's not going. Let her stay then. So, and when we become parents, it's important to talk about your biographical when you're doing research. When we become parents, as I did, I was very conscious of the fact that I was raising children with hybrid identities around national identity, around cultural identity. So they're just the little cameos that I can bring to the moment when we think about identities. And I'm sure you all could too. And if we were in a different situation, I'd ask you to tell me what they were. But we don't have that time, and this isn't the forum. And the second important word is the creativity, which we all know. You all know it well. I don't need to explain it to you. And the third is inclusion. And it's around belonging. And it's around comfortableness. It's around feeling like you are allowed to be here and you are comfortable in that space and nobody is threatening or challenging you or creating barriers for you or disadvantaging you in any way, whether it's around your pay gap, whether it's around your relationship with your colleagues, whether it's around your relationship with your time within the organization, the flexibility of those hours, the accommodations that are made for you, and without you being made to feel that accommodations are being made for you, etc. So identity, creativity, and inclusion are these three key notions. So how do we use gender, all of those, in order to challenge and promote gender equality and inclusion? I truly believe that gender equality is a critical determinant, to health and well-being. And I've written about this at length. And I've written about how the culture and creative industries, especially the advertising industries, can impact directly in a negative way, especially on young women and girls, but also on young men and boys by default. Because if we're being told that that is how we are all supposed to be as women, and men are getting the same message, then it ain't looking good for any of us, because it's a false reality that we are all buying into that is going to lead us down a very dark cul-de-sac. again, I could talk about that for many hours if you wish. So we also have to bear in mind that gender equality is a fundamental human right. So that's when it gets nice and serious. We have UNESCO and we have WHO, we have all the big organizations telling us it's a bloody human right, guys. You know, it isn't just something that's fluffy and we think we might add to the curriculum this year. It's actually a human right. And it benefits all of us when we get it right. It really does. Everybody wins when we get the balance right. So that brings me to the last phase. When I think about creativity and when I think about how I can harness creative thinking and good idea design and good design thinking and good pedagogy, because as an educator that's kind of where I end up landing, I'm very, very conscious that the creative media and creative communities using spaces like art and design, theatre, drama, music can be fantastic learning spaces. And when I was HOD with the Department of Gender Studies, two of the things that we did, and this is a kind of little case study for you, two of the things that we did that were extremely fun, remember that list? Extremely fun and playful, extremely successful, and engaging, were two events that we held. The first was it was an actual play that was performed by two young men living in Malta, and it was based on Stella, Niall Bartlett's work, which is about a one-man play and two bodies, and it's set back in Victorian times in Britain, and it's about a young man who ends up living his life as a woman. So the play is between two male bodies coming forward and back and telling the story about this young man's experience. And the second moment was where we harnessed the script, or rather the lyrics of some of the music in Greece for workshopping around gender equality and safety. So what were those moments? Well, Stella the play, we decided we were going to bring to the community. And if anybody's ever been to Valletta, anybody? No? Going once, going twice? At the back. And you walked, well, you have to come. We have an Erasmus. I don't know if we can take all of you in one go, but we'll try. When you get to Valletta, and you've got Republic Street, and it's this beautiful Baroque city, and it's a beautiful city. It's tiny, it's a postage stamp. It's got 8 streets, no, maybe more. But it is absolute perfection as a miniature. And as you look at the streets, they are grid. So the Knights were very clever. They built this beautiful walled city with a wonderful grid system, and they were probably the first to do it. So you can't get lost. So if you walk down Republic Street and then you go sidestep once to the right, sidestep twice to the left, you're in a little tiny street called Straight Street. And Straight Street was, is no longer, but it was the red light district. It was where all the Navy and the Army in the 1950s spent their time. It was where the working women within that space resided, and it was a pretty impoverished space. It was also colloquially referred to as the gut. So again, from a semiotic perspective, you can understand how that might reflect the space. And in fact, here's some images for you. Those women standing at the doorways and how they might have looked with the Navy and the Army and the Cambridge Music Hall and the Empire Bar, all reminiscent of a colonial time that was still hanging on in the 1950s in Malta. So Straight Street is this narrow street, and as I said, often referred to as the gut. And if you ask any British serviceman, almost done, they will remember, if they're based in Malta, they will remember Straight Street. So we thought this was a good place to hold Stella. That's how it looks today. It's gone very upmarket, very gentrified, lots of beautiful bars, and it's really cool to go there. It's great to have a drink and a bit of a party. But we used a bar called the Splendid Bar, and we hosted Stella for 2 nights. And we got the local community and students to talk about fluidity in gender, performances of gender. We got them, after they'd watched the movie, to think about Judith Butler's theories. So here we were in the middle of the city talking to people who'd never heard of Judith Butler about what performance of gender might be, and letting people go away and have a think about it. And that's all we want to do as educators. The second thing we did was we brought Grease the movie to the Cotonera region, which is again the harbour region, which is similar in demographic, so it's an impoverished area. And we ran workshops where we asked the students, the practitioners, to take the lyrics of, was it Summer Lovin'? And in fact, halfway through Summer Lovin' you get, Wella, 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 tell me more, did you get very far? And then the second one was, tell me more, did she put up a fight? Well, didn't think I was going to sing, but you can't say it. So they were two moments which we've all seen Greece. Those moments have passed us. But that was actually a moment of date rape that nobody ever stops and thinks about. And one of the things we need to do going forward is to name things. And if we name them, we can talk about them. And as designers and as creators and as producers of material culture, that's going to be the fun that you guys do. You get to go out and name. As we are all working to do, you help us work along that track and call out and name and put words on these moments to make them transformative moments and to turn these things into transformative opportunities. And that's me done. Thank you.
Thanks, Brenda. That was lovely sound. Cool. That was interesting. So our next speaker is Sarah Bowie. Yeah. No. Okay. Cool. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. So our next speaker is Mckenzie Royal, former IDI president, which is a big deal, and founder of The Big Idea, and founder of the Y Design. Currently sits on the National Design Forum, a government-led initiative to drive Ireland's capability and reputation as a source of design information. So, do you want to welcome to the stage?
Thanks, Paddy. I'll just put my presentation on. Brenda, I really enjoyed the presentation as well.
Thank you.
Let me see if I can find mine. Come on. Okay, that's not mine. Hold on. Oh, there it is. It's on the island. And view. Is this just share screening, is it?
Yeah.
How do I view? Hold on, play. I just need my speaker notes. How do I do that? Yeah, speaker notes are not on this one though. No. Sorry. Technology's great, isn't it? I can wing it. View. Hold on. You know what I'll do? View. Play slideshow in window. View. Play. Sorry.
Let me try that. Give it a go. Start the slide, start the show, see what happens.
Nope. All right, we're going to wing it. So.
Just go back to where it is.
Customize presenter display. Yeah. Play. Can you go to
Oh yeah, play.
Just stop the presentation for a second. No, see me.
Play. Customize presenter display, is it?
just in case that lets us know notes or something?
There we go. Press stop.
It should go automatically. Nope.
Try again.
Is that working?
Yeah, we can see it. Do you hear it?
Nope. View, here we go. You can, aha! Now, can you see that? Okay, great. Sorry about that. Technology is great until it doesn't work. Okay, so my name's Kim, as you know, and I am a very unreasonable woman. And I can't remember what I told Fiona I was going to talk about, but it's completely different. Because that's how we roll. Does this change? Come on. Yeah. So, this was the best compliment I ever got in my life. The reasonable woman adapts herself to the world. The unreasonable one persists in trying to adapt the world to herself. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable woman. And that's changed from a George Bernard Shaw quote because it was actually about a man. And that's what you're allowed to do. You can change things. And apart from being unreasonable, I'm also a designer, which, and by the way, caveat, an industrial designer. So I'm not a graphic designer. These are not my fonts. So don't judge the kerning or anything or spacing because this looks slightly different from the original version. But it inevitably means that I do an awful lot more than just be a designer. And my work and my life have collided over the years, and I've chosen to take on more, to work in the dark hours on projects that I'm really passionate about because of my lived experiences. And this is what happened when I got the invitation, because this has come at a very stressful point in my life, because I had a big showcase on Friday, the biggest funding pitch we've ever had on Monday, and another funding pitch this afternoon. And Fiona's apologising, but I am number one gobshite who says yes to a lot of things. And thanks for Fiona for the invitation. I mean that genuinely. So I've only have 20 minutes with you today, and that's the shortest talk I've ever given in my life. So I'm going to talk about a couple of the movements that I've designed and give you a little bit of advice at the start of your creative career and all the things I wish I knew when I was starting out. So strap in for the imposter, the unreasonable bits, the superpowers, and a bit of world domination. Did that actually work? Yes, it did. So in 2016, which is a long time ago, you're probably born then, I was approached with an opportunity to become president of the IDI, and I had this really nagging doubt. I went, what? Why me? Who said no? And I had been a member for a number of years, and the IDI is Institute of Designers Ireland for anybody who doesn't know. But I always wanted to sign my Christmas cards from El Presidente. So, and I actually did that year. So with a big gulp, I said yes and just went for it. But from my first job, I had been cultivating an inner cheerleader. I was the first female designer hired in Design Partners. There was a massive, obviously gender gap, but pay gap, personality gap, age gap, every gap you can imagine. I was like an alien in that studio. And I went in and said, I am a legend every day, because I had to back myself. Nobody else was. So I started building up this resilience because I was competing with guys 5-10 years who had all that experience and were absolute legends, playing on an international design platform. And I just had to do it to build myself up. So you can imagine, I walk in, I'm like, I am a legend. And you're like, where is she coming from? But this was my cheerleader backing myself. And I was the only female there for quite a number of years, I think 7 years. That was a really tough environment to work in. But I knew what I wanted to do immediately. It was my chance to connect with like-minded people who understood my language and achieve something really meaningful. So put that inner cheerleader to work, and if I was going to be president, I was going to leave a big mark. And there were two things I wanted to tackle in that tenure. In 1 year, with full-time job and 2 young kids, gender equality and mental health. So where did Why Design start? And thanks, Paddy, whydesign.ie. It's ingrained now in everybody's minds. I was really, really fed up. There were so many pale, male, stale panels at events. I was fed up seeing male, stale management teams because I was pitching in front of them all the time. I was fed up being the minority in the room, being interrupted, not being recognised as a lead in a project, being afraid of travelling alone, being judged on what I was wearing before I even spoke. And men are great, but come on, guys, give us a chance. And it was not, see the fonts, it was not that easy to be included, and I didn't want to elbow my way in. Why should I? This should not be my problem, or my friends, my daughters, or any other female in the room. But, and there's a big but, research has shown that women have an unentitled mindset. We feel less entitled than men in most areas of our lives, leading to inequality in pay, not to demand more, have a higher domestic load, and be exploited. And this gap widens for women in minority groups. I was born into a man's world. I was viewed as less than, and that's written in the Constitution in Ireland. I have an assumed role in the household. I had less rights to my body as a man. Products were and still being designed for men, not me. 5% of women were in industrial design, my industry. Smartphones were designed and are still being designed for a man's hand, which is 5.5 inches, lads. And women are 47% more likely to have an injury in a car accident because the seat and the steering wheel are designed for a man's body. Women sit in cold offices as heating systems are designed for a man's resting temperature. And male politicians still are talking about women's health. I don't know if you know Stephen Donnelly. His first meeting was in a room with 20 men and 1 woman talking about women's health. It's still happening. And we only have ever had 1 female on maternity leave as a politician ever in Ireland. And Ireland is currently ranked 101st in the world for female representation in the national parliament, behind Afghanistan. Yeah. 1 in 4 of us have been sexually assaulted. It's not good enough. There are 11% of women as creative directors, and we are the most progressive industry around, creating new innovative ideas and products and services, yet we can't do this right. There are more women studying design than ever before, but it does not transfer to industry. Unconscious biases have proven that men hire what they know, men. Female CVs are viewed more critically than male CVs, and women only apply for jobs when they hit all the requirements. So the girls in the room, listen to me. Apply for the bloody jobs if you only tick 1 box. Just go for it, because all the guys do. And the language we use is masculine in job advertisements. We still see it. Heavyweight designer, middleweight designer, lightweight designer. I'm not a boxer. I'm not a fighter. Why are they asking for one? So what could I do? I could be really unreasonable. And I started talking, and together with a team of volunteers, we created whydesign.ie, thanks Patty, and where we feature amazing women who are inspiring role models. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And encouraging young women in the industry to climb the ladder if they want to, or even just get into the design industry. And since 2017, we have had a 50-50 gender balanced conversation at our events. It's really important that guys talk about this as well. With the amazing Lauren Curran, founder of Upfront, Niall O'Kelly, Director of User Experience in Adidas, Natasha Jen, partner in Pentagram, Terry Brunfott, co-founder of Base Design, New York Geneva, Annie Atkins, Oscar-winning illustrator, Chris Doe, Emmy Award-winning designer, and founder of The Future, to name a few. And all we had to do was ask these people to talk, and they said yes. That's a lesson in itself. And here are just a handful of inspiring women featured on the site. Come on. Here we go.
Setting up a business is really terrifying. I love not having to be in an office at a certain time. And the first couple of years, I definitely worked 6 or 7 days a week, like what I do.
So what I've really enjoyed since coming here is being really hands-on in terms of the culture of the company, helping to build that, work with the team closely.
We work on ideation, brainstorming, producing prototypes, and then bringing that product to market.
I'm in a street art collective called the Manaw Collective, and it's just a lovely community. We all swap ideas and you get tips off people.
I suppose it's a process really in a lot of ways of figuring out what the people who are going to use your product need, what their goals are, and it also marries in with kind of business and business strategies.
You have to put in a lot of work, there could be a lot of overtime, but it pays off in the end. One thing seeing it on a screen, but then actually seeing it in real life is really fulfilling.
If you're in that moment where you're kind of scared of something or something that's about to happen, it's probably going to teach you something. Like, you're probably going to learn something new, or you're going to learn something about yourself or your capabilities, so don't be afraid of that.
It's not just about making something look pretty, but it's also about making it work as well.
It's about communication, creating a tone and a vibe through the drawing and illustration of letters.
Give yourself permission to pursue whatever it is that you're drawn to.
So how can we succeed? Well, we can with the support of our community, which you are now entering. Normalising seeing awesome women talking about themselves and their amazing work and supporting them, giving them that like or comment or share. Representation really, really matters. And this is unusual actually, to have more women talking at events than men, so good one, Fiona. And we can link arms, give each other a platform and share a little room at the table, because you can't take a seat if there's no room. And give other young women to have the chance, what I never had, visibility of somebody awesome in the industry doing what they want to do. And again, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And this phenomenal illustration is by Ellie Thompson, drawn independently after one of our events. And this is evidence of why design supporting women in our industry. And it was so incredible to see. And then it was a subject, or a time for a subject that's really close to my heart.
You invest so much of yourself into your work. Kind of the work you do is almost kind of a representation of you, and so it can be quite exhausting.
Depression is heavy. It's a disconnect between your brain and your body. It's like a balloon floating away, your mind just floating higher and higher into the universe, and you're looking down on yourself, and all the while your shoulders are getting heavier.
I feel like there would be a lot of people that are going through stuff mentally but are afraid to say anything. A lot of people don't want to feel like they're, I don't know, for lack of a better term, weak.
I had 2 weeks of constant panic attacks and not sleeping properly. Waking up in the morning, rocking, I felt so flat, and I realised I wasn't engaging with the world. So I went to see my GP, saying to someone I needed help actually took such a burden off my shoulders of just saying, I can't do this on my own.
And if Why Design wasn't enough to kick off my first initiative in my presidential year, I earned the nickname as #1 gobshite from my husband when Mind Over Matter was established. And I read a fascinating article in 2016 that stated creatives were 25 times more likely to experience a mental health issue in their lifetime than regular people. And this rang true to me on so many levels. I wanted to raise awareness, reduce the stigma, and connect a community to make a real difference. And when you do something for other people, it's actually really, really good for your own well-being. And when you connect with like-minded people, it elevates us all. So we went truly national. We had a mural in Dublin city centre. We had billboards across the country, some we couldn't even find. We had national radio ads, launch events across the country. And Sean Gallagher here, I don't know if you remember him, but he was a presidential candidate and announced his running the day of that conference. We got national press, which was absolutely amazing, all on feck all budget. So the stars really, really aligned for us. And I ticked off a few things on my bucket list. I stopped traffic in Carlow. So this is the Braun building, if you've ever been to Carlow. It's one of the biggest buildings in the country. And Sean Gallagher actually owned the site. I asked him if we could use it. He said yes. We got a cherry picker from Height for Hire for free. And we projected a laser animation on the side of the building for 6 weeks. And that went national again. So it was really, really incredible. But this mental health initiative was really not good for mine. It drove me to the edge. And I already had a full-time job. I was a mother of 2 young children, and I became really, really bad at all of those things. It became an absolute beast. I was working 18-hour days, and every weekend. It had massive potential, but sadly I could not commit to driving it forward, and that's okay. But every interaction and every project and every role led me to creating the big idea. And Patty, I'm going way over, sorry. But, oh, super. External examiner in IT Sligo, as a guest lecturer in Maynooth University, student advisor NCAD, track captain at Dublin Startup Week, and Voxgig, actually a local company in startup. I was head of marketing and product. And I represent ID on a number of government panels, and another one is Expert Group for Future Needs Skills, which is a really, really long name. And I mentor a number of design students, and also on the Going Far program, which is an immigrant entrepreneurship program. And if you ever get a chance to be a mentor, take it. And if you want to be a mentee, go ask somebody in the industry. 99% of people will say yes and give you half an hour, even once a month. Just do it. But essentially, I believe in the power of creativity to affect positive change. And I've had a massive frustration with how creativity is valued in Ireland. From government to education to industry, society, we are not utilising the creative minds in our country. And we teach our students in silos or subjects, which actually breaks down divergent thinking or lateral thinking, as Brenda mentioned. And we are educating people out of creativity. But creative thinking actually connects, and it breaks down barriers and leaves room for discovery. So it's immensely powerful. And it's been reflected in recent studies from the World Economic Forum, LinkedIn and Forbes, stating that creativity is the #1 skill we all need in 2025. So that's problem solving, critical thinking, all of those elements that you have learned over those 40 years are going to be key for your progression. And we don't teach that in schools. So we believe creativity is the answer to absolutely everything. We equip students with the creative mindset they need to tackle the biggest problems they face, and in other words, to change their world. The Big Idea is a creative education program developing game-changing creative thinking skills in students, bringing problem-solving, resilience, empathy, critical thinking, research, communication, and collaboration to 15 and 16-year-olds at a time when it can make the biggest difference. And we're backed by industry and academia, and our TY, Youth Reach and LCA program in a 2-class per week format has brought together thousands of students across the country to work on the topics that matter most to them: mental health, housing crisis, healthcare, equality, and climate change. We have successfully bridged the gap between industry and education. Hundreds of industry professionals from every sector have paid to support students through our program and gave up their time to mentor them. So we are directly transferring knowledge in a practical and a collaborative way so students can use that shared learning directly on their projects. We are fully inclusive. The program is entirely free, and we provide all teaching and learning activity materials free to students and teachers. For an example, this is where it gets really fun: a Lego pack for systems thinking exercises, and a notebook for reflection and brainstorming and so much more. And students create, experiment, invent, take risks and have fun. But we were not the only ones to have fun, and they weren't either, so did our teachers.
I loved it. I definitely want to do it again. It was so much fun. The creativity warm-ups were probably my favourite part.
They've learned how to go through a process of design from step 1 all the way through. They've followed that design process, the journey that they've travelled all along the way. That's the most important thing, and that's really where the learning has been.
I would personally love to do it again now that I know what's involved, because I think even I learnt a lot. It's a great opportunity for any school to be a part of.
I think it was unbelievable the level of resources and lesson plans that were given with the programme. I think the support, and of course, you know, the students love getting goodies, you know, and these were so well thought out and so effective.
I absolutely love being part of the Big Idea, as did the students.
It is a great opportunity for them to think outside the box or forget the rules. The buy-in from the students and the fact that they've enjoyed it.
Seeing them being able to adapt it and come up with these ideas and think outside the box and just think of their heroes in the local community and try and come up with an initiative to help them, it's just fantastic.
So our plans for growth are based on sustainably achieving nationwide engagement in 4 years, reaching 4,000 students next year, and then we take on the world. We've actually just started an EU project that we're really excited about. But I've never ever worked on a project alone, even though I'm a legend. We have full-time volunteers in our first year. Building our non-profit or profit for purpose is not glamorous. I work 10 to 12 hours, a bit less than the 18, and I invested 18 months of my own time unpaid, packing bags, building websites, creating marketing campaigns, applying for funding, raising funds to get the big idea off the ground, and all to include more students. And it's all a lot of help with my team and family and my daughters and grannies and everything lent a hand, but always with butterflies in the tummy. And then finally, I wanted to share some superpowers that help me. We all have them, and that you can so that you can identify your own superpowers for your very exciting leap into the creative industry. So that's impossible. You were probably not even born then either. But I've learned over the years not to worry too much about what people think of me, because I can't control that. But what I can control is what I think of me. I'm really competitive with myself. I hold myself to a very high standard, and I am still my own cheerleader. And I'm very forgiving if I fail. And if I try to, actually it's very hard to try and manage myself, impose guilt as a working mother, but I'm still working on that day to day. Squad. I have made it my business to surround myself with amazing people that are better than me. So surround yourself with people that are better than you, and it does actually rub off. And this is one of my favorite all-time gifts. And I do actually walk like that. And I ask a lot, as you might have noticed. I firmly believe if you don't ask, you don't get. So please remember that. If that's one thing you take away, ask. It's not something women are comfortable doing, and we usually give. So ask and see what happens, and say thank you when that ask actually does happen, and deal with rejections. No equals not right now. Oh, you can always go back and ask again, and ask if you need help, because the world will open up for you. Yes. And do not do this. I have burnt a few bridges over my 20 odd years in industry, so don't do that. Learn from me, because you might actually need to cross them one day. And get really uncomfortable. Don't stay in your own lane. Get all up in somebody else's lane. The best things happen when you're uncomfortable, and I'm really happy to say I'm uncomfortable all the time. And the big wins don't happen often, so celebrate the small ones. This is actually my favorite GIF of all time. Don't know if you've seen it. Awesome! And aim really high. I always joke with my friends that I'm planning to take over the world, but really I am aiming high so that I can get somewhere in between. And I'm always working on taking over my own world. And the big idea is going to help young people change our world. And who knows, it might even help them to take over their own world. And lastly, but never least, my daughters, Bevan and Blair, and Bevan's not featured here, or sorry, Blair's not featured there. And this is really easier said than done, but try and approach everything as a child, and I'm very close to my inner child. Ask that awkward question, climb a little higher, make a new friend in a second. And that was me. Here's your invitation. If you want to get involved in the big idea and support students as graduates, as many of our partners sponsor graduate places, look out for the sign up on our social channels and give us a follow. And best of luck in this new, very exciting chapter in your career. And we hope to actually hire a design intern, so please do look out for that when we actually have time to do a job spec. So thanks so much, everyone.
Brilliant. We want to take a quick 20-minute break. Kim's not going to be here, and so thanks Brenda, thanks Kim. So yeah, thanks. So yeah. back for half 12. Is that cool? Thank you. Okay. Hello. Everyone ready? Dankeschön, Dankeschön. Coolio. So, you ready? Yeah. Okay. So we're going to start the show back again. Now we have Sarah Bowie, an illustrator from Dublin, now based in Waterford. She's a broad range of creative works, awards for work aimed across print and virtual platforms. Best known since 2019 for her illustration material for the COVID-19 pandemic. So here we go.
Can't even get out of my chair. Hello, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming to your own degree show. Why would you not? Thanks especially to Fiona for inviting me to be here. I sincerely feel incredibly honoured and really, really lucky to be a part of your graduating experience. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of my work, but I'd like to share any insights I've kind of gleaned along the way, which might be of help to some of you guys. Okay, I've also got my little notes here. Okay, so a bit nervous. I'm going to kick off with some pages, as Paddy already mentioned there. This is a journal series that I did during the pandemic. It's my observations of people around Wexford and here in Waterford City. I just really love those tiny disposable moments of ordinary everyday life stuff that we see all the time. Couples snogging on a bench, a girlfriend showing her boyfriend a bra she's just bought in pennies. I don't know why, I just feel these moments need to be commemorated for some strange reason. Maybe in 100 years' time they'll seem really fascinating to somebody. But it actually started in Dublin a few years before on my bus commute into work. And actually here's the very first observational sketch that I did and posted online. This was back in November 2017. And what was interesting about that time in my life was I was suffering from a fairly severe case of burnout after a few years spent as a freelance illustrator. I was feeling like a little bit of a failure at that time, actually. I had to walk away from the illustration. It wasn't working out for me, mentally or physically. I had to step back. I had just started work as a graphic designer for a large corporate multinational. It was fine. It wasn't the dream job. And I was about 3 weeks into the job at this stage, and I just felt compelled to draw this woman who I'd seen on the bus doing her makeup. And I always use words as well, so I illustrate, but I always have to take notes too. It was the first time in years that I had done a drawing where I didn't wonder if there was a market for it. I didn't wonder if it would find an audience. And I didn't judge whether or not it was good. And it felt really refreshing and really freeing to make work and not care about the result of it, just to make it because I liked it. So I made it my daily practice. I wanted to see how many days, weeks and months I could keep it going for. I'd go into work early, about 20 minutes early. I'd leg it up to the canteen, and then I would just get out of my head whatever I'd seen on the bus that had interested me. I would get it down onto paper, no pre-planning, no rough sketch. I worked in ink, so it was messy, scribbly. If I made mistakes and it looked crap, so be it. That's just the way it went. And I certainly didn't expect anybody to ever read them. I was sincerely doing these for myself and nobody else. So it was a really nice surprise when about 6 months into doing these sketches, the journal got in touch and they asked me could they do a little article on some of my sketches, and I said, yeah, of course, Delira. And then a little bit after that, Cara magazine got in touch and they included me in a feature that they were doing on people who were documenting Dublin in different ways. And that was a lovely bit of unasked for, whatever you'd like to call it, publicity, I suppose. And then about 6 months after that, The Guardian featured a selection of them on their online edition. And that for me was a really big dream fulfilled. It's the kind of work I'd really love to do. I love print media, well, even though that was online, but and The Guardian as a newspaper I really respect. And shortly after that, that came out in the January, so the Irish Times got onto me and they asked me, they commissioned a special story for their Valentine's Day edition. And I based this one on an older couple who I had the pleasure of eavesdropping on the bus one morning. We were coming in from Kimmage and they were talking about Pat Kenny, of course, but they were also talking about Dublin in the older days, about people going to the pubs in the morning before work. They were commenting on everything the whole way in, and it was an absolute pleasure and an honour to get to hear it, and I turned it into that little strip there. Most recently, I have secured a little bit of funding from the Arts Council to help gather all these observations together, so the pandemic ones as well as the bus commute ones, and to bring them to market in book format. So that's the next step for these, something that I hope to accomplish. Now, the reason why I'm showing you all this wasn't to have a little brag about myself or anything like that, although, sure, why not? Humble brag, humble brag. But the key point of it was what I found interesting, and I didn't know what I was doing at the time, but now I'll be aware of the signs again, and I would try and alert you to the signs as well. And Kim mentioned depression as well. It is very, very common in the creative sector, unfortunately. It's kind of the nature of the industry, and it's the nature of the way we're wired. We tend to be quite sensitive. It was only when I stopped trying really hard to be a successful illustrator and then I actually walked away from it. And that was very painful. It actually felt like a breakup, but I walked away from it and said to myself it was okay if I never drew anything ever again. And it's weird how it was only when I did that this kind of playful little spirit came back to me again. And this very random, weird thing that the market certainly wasn't looking for started to come out of me quite forcefully every single day. And people seem to respond to it, and they seem to enjoy it, and they seem to get something from it. So I would say, especially if you're going the freelance route, but even if you're in a company or an agency setup, be very aware of signs if you're feeling very angsty, if you're feeling very stuck, that you're pushing very, very hard and you're not getting results. Or if you're a little bit of a victim of your own success, you're super busy, you're really, 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 really busy. Anything that blocks you from the connection with that inside thing, don't be afraid to press the pause button. Take the pressure off yourself and just let yourself recenter. I thought I was failing as an illustrator, but actually what I was doing was I was recalibrating, and I'm so grateful that I did get a chance to do that. So don't be afraid to walk away at any point if you feel that's what you need to do. Now, this kind of segues on to the next thing that I want to talk about, which is money, and especially if you're freelancing. The big balancing act that you will do is trying to get that balance between doing work that's creatively satisfying to you, but also earning a living. And this will vary from person to person. It depends on what creative area that you're operating in. Some areas are way more lucrative than others. My passion is for books, so picture books, comics, the least lucrative area that you can be in, so that's just my little cross that I have to bear. So the first time around when I was freelancing, did I mention that? Yeah, so I was freelancing for about 4 years before I took the break. And during that 4-year time, I'll just let some of the work that I worked on scroll there in the background while I talk. I got to work on some good jobs that I really did enjoy. But the reality was I also did an awful lot of illustration work that I didn't enjoy and that I wouldn't be happy to put in my portfolio. They were money jobs. There's absolutely no shame at all in doing money jobs. We have to do those kinds of jobs. I had a very rigid notion about what it meant to be a successful illustrator. For me, it meant 100% of my income came from illustration. I would not even contemplate doing anything else on the side. So that meant I took on a lot of these money jobs in the illustration field. And jobs that I mean that are unsatisfying, especially as an illustrator, you can get asked to draw in a style that's not your own. You can get asked to draw like a 6-year-old for an ad campaign. You can get asked to imitate another illustrator style for a book. Whatever, you can work on jobs that get cancelled at the last minute, even though you still get paid. And that can be a bit soul destroying. So what was the point that I wanted to make about that? Yeah, so I ended up like at the point of, well, why am I even doing this? There are actually easier ways to earn money if money is what I want. Took my break. I worked as a graphic designer for about 3.5 years. Really good time, reconnected with my own creative voice. But it was always on the cards that I would come back to freelancing. I really love working for myself, and I love having control over my own schedule, and I love having that flexibility. So I left the company I was working for and went freelance last September, but this time in a very, very different mind space. This time I said to myself, the illustration, I want to keep it pure. I only want to do illustration jobs that I want to do. So for me, those are books. So at the moment I'm working on 2 books, one for kids and one for adults, which are due for publication next year. And I'm pitching for lots of other work that I'm interested in doing. And I earn my money through teaching. And I loved what Kim and I loved what Brenda were saying about the educational side. It was a sort of mercenary decision. And yet I also wanted to do something that might sort of ignite a light in other people, that had a little bit of purpose to it. So I went into the education side of things not really knowing what to expect, but I have discovered a passion for bringing visual language into the classroom sphere at primary, secondary, and to a lesser extent at 3rd level education. So I teach teachers and I teach students of all ages how to use visual language to both teach, to communicate concepts, really importantly to study, to learn, not to study per se. Like I just have no time for this longhand taking notes. It's using your own doodling and visual imagery skills to process information, to process emotions. And I do comics making workshops and creative writing workshops with all sorts of age groups. And this is something that gives me a lot of satisfaction. I pick my own hours with it as well. And what I would say is another key thing that you're going to discover on your journey, again, regardless of whether you're freelance or with a company, you will find the balance that works for you. If you're freelance, there's absolutely, I don't know why I had a real stigma about doing non-illustration specific work. There is no shame at all whatsoever earning your income through other strands, whatever those strands are. You need to earn a living. Do not drive yourself into anxious debt, as I almost did. And that balance will constantly be changing. There'll be times when you're more on the satisfying work end of the scale and times when you're more on the, okay, I need to earn money this month scale. And just stay aware of it and fine tune it yourself as you go along. And if you are full-time with the company, make sure you carve out a little bit of time for your own, to use a hackneyed phrase, passion projects, but work that means something to you. You have to keep that little spark alive. It's really, really important, or you will get very sad and very depressed. Okay, I'm skipping ahead now in my notes. So the last thing that I would like to talk to you about is community. You guys are really lucky. You have a ready-made community right here. This is really, really precious, and you've had 4, I know, really tough years, and I know the pandemic came and absolutely drove a wedge between all that face-to-face contact, but it's so important. I studied marketing and languages, which sounds way more creative than it was. We did a module in semiotics and I loved it. That was really great. But a lot of it was economics, statistics, maths. My first 2 years after college were spent in financial services, which is as grim as it sounds. The key point is I actually knew absolutely none of my friends, nobody I knew was doing anything remotely creative. And I didn't realise what a loss that was for me until several years later I joined an illustration collective. And it was only when I started working with them, we used to put on little exhibitions, that I realised that they gave me energy, they gave me momentum, and I learned things from them, and I got tips about do this thing or do that thing, and that's when my career actually really started to take off. So you guys already have that community, but sometimes there is stuff that you might be interested in that doesn't exist in your neighbourhood, and maybe you're not in a position to travel to where that stuff is happening. That was the case for me back in 2015. I was really interested in indie comics, and in Dublin at that point it was still, not to be man bashing or anything, but it was still a very male sphere. It was all guys. When I used to go to like comic conventions, I'd be like, oh, whose girlfriend are you? Like, I couldn't possibly be there just for myself. It was very male, it was very small, and it was very genre driven. It was a lot of sci-fi, fantasy stuff. I wasn't hearing other voices or other stories like I was seeing when I went to festivals abroad. So myself and Debbie Jenkinson, who was a fellow comics maker, we set up the Comics Lab in 2015, which was a monthly space. We got a free room, basement of a pub in Dublin. And we put out a call and we said, no matter who you are, whether you've ever made comics before, whether you like comics or don't like comics, but if you're interested in exploring, telling stories, using words and images, come along. And what we did was we'd have a couple of speakers lined up each month, usually people from our community. They would talk about whatever it is they were doing. We had architects, animators, motion graphics people from RTE. We had a costume designer from the set of Penny Dreadful. Like, we got really interesting people in, and we also did little workshop elements, just playing around. One of the key things that we did is we used donations from people who used to come to the Comics Lab to fund anthologies. So we put out a call for a 2-page comic strip from everybody, and whoever wanted to apply, and then we'd publish these anthologies. And the point was to incentivize people to start making work. And I know the photos kind of flew by there, but you could see from the audience, it was a really mixed audience. Like, we had loads of women, we had just a really, really good, diverse group there, and we got these new voices in. Myself and Debbie took it to the next stage. We approached the Irish Times and we asked them would they be interested in sponsoring a national graphic short story prize, which is a posh way of saying a comics competition. Just sounds way, we knew we had to go fancy if the Irish Times were to get involved, so we went fancy and they liked the sound of that. And so we opened it to the whole of Ireland, all 32 counties. I'm not being a nationalist, we just didn't want to leave anybody out. And we got entries from all over Ireland, which was just really amazing. And the winner was printed in the Irish Times, and we published another anthology with all the shortlisted entries, and it was just a really nice way to galvanise the community and spread it outside of Dublin as well. And we're not doing this for like little halos or whatever. We all benefited from it as well. Myself and Debbie, we wanted to learn, we wanted to get better. That's primarily why we did it. And then you never know when you get something going where it's going to lead. So Matt Mellis was one of our first kind of members in the Comics Lab, and he kind of took the torch. He really wanted a quarterly comics art festival where people could sell their work. And so he set up DCAF, Dublin Comics Art Festival, I can't even say it. And as you can see there, the community just kept on growing. That's Matt up there. So that's still running. They were just on there last week. The Comics Lab has a presence at it. And he also founded Little Dear Comics, which if you're in Dublin, I do think it's the best comics shop in Dublin, because Matt goes around, he's from the States, and he goes around the UK and the States and Ireland, and he brings back the best alternative and indie comics, zines, graphic novels. So if you're looking for stuff that's interesting, you will find it there, and he will order in anything that you want. So I think Waterford is a really ripe space for this kind of thing, whatever it is that you're interested in. I just really feel Waterford can take off. I think it already is. I think I actually already know some of you here, and I'm really excited by what I see that you're doing. I think you've got really good people here. You've got the library, you've got the local arts council, you've got a lot of businesses around, a lot of pubs who I think would give up space happily. If there's anything you're interested in doing, don't be afraid to just do it. I would definitely, there's opportunity here, so go for it. And that just leaves me to say thank you for listening, and also sincerely the best of luck with each of your creative journeys. It will be your own unique journey. You will make it up as you go along. I am around most days. I am more than happy if there's anything you want to chat about. There's lots of stuff that I didn't put in here, but if you want to go deeper into using illustration skills in lots of different spheres, give me a shout. We can go have a coffee. I'm always available for a chat. Best of luck, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, that was brilliant. Thank you. That's good. And so now we have Gerard Whelan. Gerard is the founder and creative managing director of Brand Central, which is mainly based in Copenhagen and Dublin, sorry, and also in Copenhagen too. So Gerard, welcome to the stage. Thanks very much.
Let me see if I got this open. Oh, great. Okay, so just to warn you before I kick off, there's a little bit of semi-nudity in this. But as Sarah said, it's okay because both sexes were exploited. I like that. No. But okay, so very quickly, a little bit about me. I'm a graphic designer, I'm an art director, worked in the advertising industry. I'm a creative director, and I'm in brand identity. I do a lot of brand identity work. And what I wanted to talk about a little bit are the components of my work. So how I break it down. And what I wanted to try and do is give you guys a bit of a flavour, warts and all, of the type of projects that we do, and also to talk a little bit about the value that they bring, which I think is really important, because I think as an industry we bring massive value, and I don't think it's often recognised, and it's very difficult to get these kind of figures and these results. So I'm hoping I can give you guys a little bit of encouragement about how much value we bring. So and then I want to talk to you quickly about my passion. So I'm very interested in typography. I'm sure you probably all know this from Stefan Siegmeister. But what I love about it is it's not just a beautiful piece of typography, it's the management and the work that it took to actually make something like this happen. So I think that's something that's really important as well in our industry, is to manage something and to make it happen, to realize it. So you could get some idea of the logistics here. These are all, I think, 50-cent coins, I think. So it's pretty amazing that he made this happen. Another thing I love is creativity and ideas. I think this is really interesting. You don't even, it's for noise cancelling headphones, you don't even need to show the product. I think that's so clever. And I love that it has legs, it can keep going and keep going. Another thing I love is brand identity. This is a new brand identity for Mojang Studios, who make Minecraft. And what I love about it is that the shapes, the typography become little playful shapes, which I think is really interesting. Will this play? Yes. And then how it animates, the whole thing works really nicely. Also what I love about it is that these little elements become little mascots then for that can be used within the identity, and that can be used for staff to kind of bring the staff on board. What I also think is interesting, this is the original logo, and then they asked people what they thought it was, this icon here. People thought it was a dragon, an apple, a candle, or a sewing machine. I could see all of that. So, good enough reason to change it. Little story about value. This is a little story I talk about value that I think is quite interesting in the context of the work that I do. So this is Cormac, this is my son. Every time I go away on business, he says, "Dad, will you get me some Lego?" He loves Lego. And I say, "Yes, I'll get you some Lego." But this was getting very expensive. So I sort of thought I'd do a little experiment. So these are two very comparable pieces here. They have about the same numbers of pieces of Lego, etc. And I said, look, Cormac, which do you want? Do you want A or do you want B? And he said, Dad, I want A. I said, are you sure you want A? Yes, I definitely want A. Are you positive you want A? Yes. Okay. Which one do you want? B. Because it's Lego, it's brand, right? Brand has value. So you can see, you know, the difference in cost. So what I'm trying to say is branding is a large part of what it is we do, and this is sort of a, you know, a very non-scientific way of showing how that value works. So growth and value, this is what I'm trying to talk about here. So I've used these horrible kind of word meshes to try and mesh this whole thing together. So one project, as I say, I haven't said, but we do a lot of game-related work, and this is the one project that I was going to talk about around that. I can talk to you about it, warts and all. So Heroes and Generals is a free-to-play first-person shooter and real-time strategy game set in World War II. If you're a gamer, you know what that is. I'm not, so I'm still a bit confused about it, but anyway, we'll move on. So this is what it looked like before. So there were huge issues in terms of consistency, in terms of emotional engagement, and overall customer engagement. And basically, the game was failing badly. They were basically in big trouble. They were lucky enough to get a cash injection, otherwise they would potentially have gone out of business. So, phase one, we did a workshop with the employees to try and uncover the unique aspects of Heroes in General as a brand and the people behind it. So we flew up to Copenhagen, we did a workshop with them, and then that started, we did 2 workshops actually. The second workshop, we then started getting a better idea of their brand position. So they wanted to be free-to-play alternative to AAA games, AAA first-person shooter games. The brand personality was raw, honest, and forthright. So this was kind of like our research phase. Once we had that determined, we then knew that we had to establish that we needed to communicate it was a large-scale war experience. We had 3 factions, and it was set in a World War II setting. So those were kind of like the basis of what we needed to do our work. We then went into a creative development phase, and we built a creative brief. Now this is the ugliest thing you're ever going to see, but this is the creative brief that we built. Oops, will that play? Doesn't seem to be playing. Oh, it is. Right, okay. So basically, this was, I think, a 140-page creative brief that we put together that we used for all the different stakeholders to make sure that everybody was on board. So it's a highly detailed creative brief. And the stakeholders were the creative team, the key visual agency, who were going to produce our key visual, and the gaming company themselves. So it was very important that everybody was on board with where we were going to take the brand. Some of the components, we did tone of voice, character, so we kind of had a clear definition of what the tone of voice we're trying to create. We had mood boards around the different directions we were going to take the logo. We had mood boards around the different factions, so the American faction, the German faction. We had mood boards around the different characters. We had styling mood boards. So you can get some idea of the depth that we went into. So the very first phase we went into then was key visual explorations. So as I say, we worked with this agency in Copenhagen where we developed lots of different key visual directions and how we could best articulate what the game was about. So these are only a very small selection of some of the sketches that we did with the key visual agency. In each case, we tested it in context. So this is where the game is going to be downloaded from. After that, we reduced it to a short list of 3 different key visual sketches. We then went into logo explorations. So again, this was only a tiny segment of some of the different logo directions that we explored. We then reduced that down into 3 different directions. And then after that, we went into customer testing. So we had profiles of the different people that we wanted to talk to, and we went and we tried those with logos and key visuals to see which ones tested best. What we found was that this was the one that tested best, and then we went into the next phase, which was developing the identity. So we developed the key visual, went into the key visual development, and we worked with a three-dimensional head development company in Germany who helped us develop the character, so the central character. So this was our very first attempt. We then we went into kind of a rounds of feedback. So this was our feedback round into the three-dimensional head. And then as it started to progress, we kept giving more and more kind of detailed feedback until we ended up with our final three-dimensional head. We then put that on the central character. We then built that into the key visual with, as I say, the three different factions. We were trying to give this idea of the broad sort of broad war context setting. We then went into a further development round of refinement, more refinement, until we got to the final key visual. Then we went into a logo refinement process. And with the logo refinement, the monogram was the logo version that tested best. We went into a detailed phase of refinement with the logo, where we tried lots and lots of different variants. In each case, when we came to something that we thought was interesting, we would then try it with the typography to try and see how the locking system worked. We then hired a typographer to help us finish out the logo, and this is how the final logo looked. Then we brought in the setting, which was World War II, and then when that was put together with the key visual, this is what our final result was. One of the things that we were trying to do with this was to try and give the game the opportunity to work across a broad range of different settings. So, for example, Heroes and Generals Crusaders, Heroes and Generals Modern Warfare. Next phase then was communicating the brand. So we produced all the different digital assets that were required, print assets that were required, and then merchandising. So we produced all those different bits. We then put together a very detailed brand manual. So in other words, the agency, or sort of the gaming company, could then manage the communication of the brand themselves. So these are all the different things, right down to how they produce all the different assets they require for marketing. So what was interesting about this was that the key visual agency that we worked with produced the same key visual that they had originally, and we worked with the same key visual agency again. I think what you can see is that we produced something that's a much better proposition for the game, and also much better emotional engagement. The result was that the game, well, the Heroes and Generals game, went from basically almost going out of business to being listed as one of as the top 9 MMO, which is pretty spectacular. Another interesting case is for a label printing company. I didn't notice before I got involved in working with label printing companies, but these guys turn over millions every year. It's actually a huge business. And we worked with this company called Label Tech. And Label Tech had a challenge. They wanted to break into the lucrative drinks market, but they were perceived as being a very generic label printing company. So this is a big problem for them. This is how they looked before we started working with them. Very generic. And when we sort of started doing our brand analysis, what we narrowed it down to was that they had great people, an appreciation of craft, and technology. So those were 3 things that we're using to build a brand. So then we put together a new logo and identity to better position Label Tech to reflect their positioning. This is the new logo. And from a communication perspective, we focused on Label Tech's strongest resource, which were people. So we hired the best portrait photographer in the country to come in and take portraits of all their staff. And what's interesting about this was before we started working with them, they would only have photographs of their management. And this was a big battle we had with them. They really didn't like the idea of us featuring their staff over the management. We also got some nice fly-on-the-wall shots of the staff. And this helped us build our communication assets. So the next thing we needed to do was to make the brand part of the organization's DNA. So we wanted the staff and customers to be submerged in the brand. So originally this is how the offices looked. I mean, very uninspiring if you're a customer, but also very uninspiring if you're working there. So this is how it looked after the rebrand. So what was really important to us was not just about the presentation of the brand to the to potential customers, but also to the staff themselves. So they were kind of living the brand as well. The marketing objective was to show that we can produce the best quality labels and move into the lucrative drinks market. So we produced a direct mail. And this is how direct mail looks. So these direct mails were sent out to all these kind of key players, the types of people that they want to talk to within the drinks market. So you got this box, you lifted up the lid, and inside it then there was this beautifully produced sheet of labels, little tattoos, like this. And you could peel off the tattoos and then you put it on the arm on the front, and then it fits in nicely with our strength in labels idea. Inside the box then there was also a brochure that talked about them and why you should work with them. On one side, again we have our staff portraits here. And on the other side, as I said, they were a very generic label printing company. They didn't have any pretty interesting samples. So what we did was we came up with a lot of fictitious brands in the particular areas they wanted to move into, and we just made these. We made these labels for these brands that didn't exist. And at the very bottom level, we had this bottle of beer that that we got produced with one of the labels that we designed, working with an illustrator called Steve Dugan. Then phase 2 of the campaign, we produced it. It was our 25-year anniversary, and we wanted to see, well, what could we do as a piece of direct mail to the key market players? And because we had our brand positioning and we knew where we wanted to go, it became actually very clear. We said we'd send bottles of whiskey to commemorate our 25th anniversary. So we produced, we designed new labels, and we produced our own whiskey, which we sent out. On the back of the whiskey bottle, we have a little story about their 25 years from beginning to the point when we send out the direct mail. Digital, we produced a new website where we were able to showcase all the works that they were trying to do for the drinks market. Social, we were a little bit cheeky with social. So what we did was we photographed all the different labels. We got them professionally photographed. We uploaded a lot of it to different design, packaging blogs, etc. And it actually did pretty well. But the most interesting thing was they won Label of the Year award for a fictitious brand that didn't exist, which was fantastic for them because it firmly planted them within the drinks industry, even though they hadn't actually technically done any drinks labels. The result was they got 20% increase in profits within 9 months of the rebrand and marketing campaign, and Label Tech are now seen as a major player within the drinks industry. So here's the nudity. So food growth. So we got to work with in Copenhagen on a food festival in Copenhagen, and food festivals in Copenhagen are a huge big deal. They're much, much bigger than we have over here. They have food festivals within food festivals. It's that big. And one of the big problems that they were having was they were using plates of food to promote these festivals, and it didn't do it justice because there were drinks festivals, there were wine tasting festivals, so a plate of food was just not going to be correct. So we had to come up with some kind of key visual that would let's say, umbrella all these different ideas. And we came up with the idea of sensuality of food, which meant we had the nudes. This is how it panned out from a visual perspective. And yes, we also used male nudes as well. Then, so we used people the whole time. We didn't actually show food at all. Then when we got to ethnic food festivals, we did something like this. And then to kind of go completely the opposite direction, we replicated a very famous painting, Danish painting of a celebration. 1 minute? Oh, right, okay, that'll go really fast then. Okay, and that's how that panned out. The result was that we got a 400% increase year on year to the Copenhagen Cooking website. One last project I'll talk about, and this is quite an interesting one. So we're also involved in, we do a lot of work with Board Bia, and Board Bia came with this tomato growing company, firm, and they wanted us to help them rebrand. And the reason they wanted to rebrand or wanted to brand themselves at all was because they were supplying very large multinational, conglomerates like the likes of Tesco, etc. And they were concerned that these guys could pull the rug from them at any moment. And what they needed was, they wanted to have their own brand to enable them to get into stores locally. But the problem we found was every time we had a workshop with them, we said, look guys, what's different about you? What's unique? They said, well, there's nothing. We're exactly the same as the guy down the road. And we had several different workshops trying to figure out how could we position them, because they were totally generic. And then at one point, one of the partners turns around and goes, well, my father was the first man to have a greenhouse in Ireland. And we thought, that's it. It's heritage. Heritage is our entry point. And what was also interesting was the guys who run it were two brothers, and they're both probably in their 60s. And we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if we were to feature them as kids in nice old sepia tone black and white images with tomatoes for heads. And it was quite an interesting thing, and it was a very difficult thing to sell into them, because they were kind of going, you want to have us as kids with tomatoes for heads? But they bore with us. We worked really hard with them, and in the end they went with the idea. And their kind of like, you know, let's say level for success was was that if they were able to sell into their local shops in the area, that's the kind of what they wanted to do. And basically what we ended up managing to do was we ended up getting them into Aldi under their own brand. So it was hugely successful for them. And so the point I'm trying to get at here, and I know I'm running out of time, so I'll try and wrap it up. I might have one more project, but I'll wrap it up after that. But what I'm trying to get here is that I think the creativity that we bring adds massive value. And I think that's something that's really important for you guys to bear in mind. So this is one last project I'm going to go through. So I was lucky enough to work on a project for the Queen in Denmark, do some kind of branding work for her. And this is an interesting one in that this is how it ended up. But what was interesting along the way was we were doing lots and lots of different ideas. And we kind of really liked this portrait here. We kind of made some adjustments to the background, and we presented it to the Queen and to everybody else, and everybody loved it. And we thought, that's fantastic. Obviously, we were working in low res, and we said, that's fantastic. Can you send us a high res version of this? And they said, oh, you have it. And we said, we have it? They said, yeah, that's the highest resolution version we have. It's about 2 megabytes. Bearing in mind, this has to go on the side of buildings, etc. So we were lucky enough to find an agency in Denmark who were able to scale these up. Because when you see how big it had to go, this is a pretty substantial building in Denmark, it had to go there. So they did an amazing job of being able to scale this up for us. And the reason that this was successful was because they then asked us to do the branding for the Queen's 75th birthday. And that's the identity system, how we put it all together. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. I have other stuff, but I'll cut it short. So thank you very much. I think probably the biggest thing I would like if you could take away is that the value that we bring, I think, cannot be underestimated. It's so important. Okay, thank you.
That's pretty good. Grant, cool. I hope you all enjoyed it. So we're going. Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, my bad. Forgetful. So yeah, we're going to have a quick question and answering phase at the moment with 3 guests, if they're up for it. If they're not too nervous. Garrett O'Carroll is going to head it wherever he may be. So if we get it going, we'll just grab 3 chairs and do it around.
Just need to bring it into a half circle.
So
this one, she has to go. So. Yeah.
Okay, so we pass this around. Yeah.
So hi, I'm Gareth, and it's great listening today. Some really great issues were covered and some insight into the industry, and I'd just like to start off by saying on behalf of myself and the students, you know, thanks for taking the time out and coming here and speaking today. So I guess I'll get started myself with a question, and just kind of any tips for students like us kind of getting started in the industry and how we could maybe stand out or get noticed in some way.
You go first, you kick it off.
That's a good question. I think I think it's a combination of 2 things. I get a lot of portfolios coming in, and there's 2 things I really want to see. Number 1 is creativity, interesting ideas, a small amount of real projects, whether they be fictitious or otherwise. Real projects is kind of interesting, but interesting ideas are really important. So I can tell a story around that I think maybe can help. So years ago, when I was first looking at moving to Denmark, I brought over a portfolio, but I'd also worked on a personal project, and I brought that with me. And the portfolio, you know, is okay. It was some okay stuff, I think. But I think the reason that I got a lot of job offers, and the reason was that I had this personal project I did, which personally, if I'm brutally honest, I thought was crap. But so I'd gone through my portfolio and I thought, well, there's this sort of thing here I did. And I showed it to them, and that was the thing that I think people I could see, you know, people over there were most engaged with. Because it kind of showed the kind of, you know, what I was like, what I was interested in, and some of the potential that I had. So I think that to me is hugely important. I would sort of say that's really, really important. So it's a combination of being able to, because you want to have someone who can come in and be able to do, you know, be able to take projects and run with them. But you also want somebody who's going to come in with fresh ideas. So we had a guy in working with us at one stage, and he was actually very good at that. You know, he could come up with really unusual ideas, and we're kind of going, wow, okay, that's great. So fresh thinking, you know.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. And yeah, looking at it from the flip side as the one who is approaching, whether it's publishers or agencies or whatever. And it's a bit like your heritage tomato story. There's tons of designers there's tons of illustrators. It is a saturated market, but like there's lots of tomatoes. But you just have to find that little angle of what makes you you. And one of the things that I did use in my early days was, well, my surname is Bowie, and I was always getting asked, "Is David your uncle?" So I decided to do a little, like, where you take an A3 sheet of paper and you fold it down to, is that A5 size, the small one? So a little fold-out comic of why David Bowie is not actually my uncle. But imagining if in a parallel universe he was my uncle, how cool that would be. And I did a little sort of, coordinated branded thing. I had the comic, I had the business card, like that was my tagline, Sarah Bowie illustration. No, he's no relation. I branded the envelope, everything. And I timed it to send it off to agencies. Most of you heard of Offset? Yeah, so I timed it to send it just before Offset kicked off, and I was going to be at Offset, and it was a chance maybe to chat to some people, and and it got some retweets from creative directors and stuff like that. Oh, technology it's like something exploding behind my head. Everybody knows except me, but so it was a great way to sort of connect and get myself out there. So yeah, just think about, it is that connecting with what's really you. Being aware of your brand, but don't get too clinical about it. Have fun, be playful.
Thank you. I'll throw it out to the floor if anyone else has any questions. Yourself, yeah.
Hello, Luke, Waterford Gallery of Art. I'm trying to phrase my question and work out what I'm asking. So we've heard a lot today about kind of the responsibility of designers, what it is to design and to tell a story. And also you're both kind of amazing at storytelling in your own unique ways. I was wondering if there's ever a conflict in the kind of responsibility to tell the truth and the kind of in the brands and the things you're doing. Like, is there ever this kind of idea that I'm working on this thing and I'm trying to get this story out, but for me to sell this, for me to make this work, I need to deliver something that's actually maybe not completely genuine.
No, I really want to hear your answer.
That's a really interesting question, and I gave you those two. Do you want to pass? You pass them around. Okay, so that's a really interesting question. So I was involved in a project with a university called Brunel University. I don't know if you know them, and they came with a project which was all about gender-related violence. It was like serious stuff, really heavy stuff, and it was a course. So it had 3 modules, and when I looked at the content, it was so dry. It was like appalling, not appalling. I mean, it was just there was no emotional engagement. And that's something I'm very interested in, is emotional engagement, and it had no emotional engagement. So I was trying to think, well, okay, how do you create emotional engagement there? You can't. Firstly, they had no budget, so we couldn't get any photography done. Number one, we couldn't even really commission illustration. There wasn't that much money, and I knew we'd need a lot. We also had problems with the amount of content. There was a lot of content there, and we didn't want to mess with that content, because that's the thing you're talking about. That content was so serious that we didn't want to mess around with it anyway. It was serious, heavy stuff. So what we did was, and if you can see it in the book, the thing that's going around, is that we commissioned a really, really good copywriter to come up with a story all around gender-related violence, but there's just one word per page, and that word is written as a varnish. So it doesn't actually impede the content, but it creates a very emotionally engaging story. Like, it was very hard-hitting. I told the copywriter, this is that project, you can do whatever you want, essentially. I just want an engaging story. You can curse, you can do whatever you want, say whatever you want. And it was really interesting, because the feedback I got was that people just, picked them and flicking through it. They just kind of, they go like, people are like this. It was this double take, because I think what I think worked about it was that it suddenly started to become something that had emotion. and that was real. It was making it real for them, as opposed to just being a piece of an academic kind of course or whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so that's. But I think it's a really interesting point.
Yeah, no, that was very interesting. I don't really work in the advertising sort of end of things, but I think every story you tell, even how you choose to present yourself when you meet someone, that's a little story that you're editing. You're presenting a curated version. The version that I told you there, I could have told you 20 different versions. They all would have been true, but they would have given you a different insight into who I am. And I suppose when I was doing the observational stuff, yeah, it was kind of factual. It was based on real people that I was actually seeing. But also it is my very subjective interpretation of what it is that I'm seeing. When I did work for the large multinational, I would be working on pitches and presentations for subject matter that I was really uncomfortable with, clients that they represented who I feel are absolutely destroying the planet. And at the same time, that same company had an internal PR campaign to tell their employees how wonderful they were, and sustainability was bashed around every 5 seconds. Now, I found that very hard to square. And I don't know how people do tell those kind of messages with a straight face. I honestly don't know. And it is a skill, but I'm not sure how much we should be wielding that skill, to be honest.
Sorry, one more point on that. Yeah, just because that's a really, what you just said there.
Yeah.
So on that kind of whole thing about to me anyway, it's an important thing for me is my moral compass. I'm got offered to do all sorts of different jobs that I haven't done. So I worked for an agency in Denmark, and the agency was in big trouble, like big trouble. And then one of the account handlers burst in the door and he said, "Great news! We're getting to work on Prince cigarettes." And I was like, "Oh no." I said, like, forget it. And it got worse. So not only did I say I wasn't going to do it, I actually managed to persuade all the other creatives not to do it either. So essentially, the company did go bust eventually. But I mean, I wouldn't have been comfortable myself, doing something like that. I mean, I've been offered to do porn and all sorts of stuff. I haven't done any of that. So but I think it's important. Like, I've just been asked to do another job. He doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to tell him no. It's for these vape things. I'm not happy. Personally, I just, it's not my thing. I don't think it's morally. I don't feel comfortable with it. So I'm not going to do that either. And it'll be a big project, but I'm not going to do it. So I think that's really important. I think to have some kind of being able to sleep with yourself. I think that to me is really important anyway.
Anyone else? Yeah, Carl.
I suppose I'm really interested in failure as a means to success. So I'm curious as to a failed experience that you've had in your past career endeavor and something that you've taken on your trajectory going forward. If you understand that. In terms of failure, yes. So something that you've taken that you failed from and you feel you've learned from going forward.
Sure, I'll kick off. I have my failure story ready to go. Well, no, to be honest, it's what I talked about. I'm sure there's lots of smaller ones as well, but it felt like to me, that first time around with the freelance illustration when I had to walk away from it for health reasons, that really felt like a failure. My sense of self, and it's not healthy, obviously, to tie your identity so closely to what you do, but it's very easy to do that in our area. That felt like an absolute failure, and my esteem couldn't have been lower at that moment in time. I felt kind of almost ashamed, especially when I was meeting up with other illustrators or whatever at our get-togethers, and they'd ask me what I was doing. I felt so embarrassed saying I was working for a multinational as a graphic designer, and I didn't realise that whole time that actually what I was doing with the observational work was I was nurturing and growing a new strand, a strand that fit me better. You'll all have different skill sets, and when you start out, you kind of take a cookie cutter approach. You kind of see that's the path that you go. These are the kind of jobs that you do. This is how you brand yourself. This is how you distinguish yourself from other people. And these are the jobs you do if you want to work in XYZ agency or whatever. But I would just say remain really flexible you don't actually really know who you are. None of us do. Like, it's literally an unfolding horizon. And to give yourself the best chance of having a long-term fulfilling career, don't have too many preconceived notions of how it has to go for you. So things that feel like failures, doors that aren't quite opening, it's possibly because they're not the right doors for you. It doesn't mean don't work hard, do, but know when you're pushing stubbornly against something that just isn't quite right.
Thanks. Well, I've never actually failed, so I don't know. No, in terms of fail, I you know, the way I see it is, and I know this probably might sound pretentious, I don't know, but I think I fail on every single project. Every project, I kind of go, oh, that colour's not quite right, or whatever. But what I think is that for me, it's like, I think it's kind of learning. So you kind of go, okay, that thing wasn't right, and you know, you learn from it each time. So every single project, I think it's gone wrong, and in just different ways. But it's just a case of trying to learn from it. And then I think, you know, that feeds into your work. But it's also taking that risk. I think if you don't take a risk, then you're in big trouble. I think you have to take risks every single project, you know. Yeah, and risk failing, you know.
There's one more question there. Jack?
Just with creativity being such a big part of your job, and obviously when you get kind of gainfully employed, you're kind of, maybe you have deadlines and stuff then, like when you're really not feeling the creative, I suppose, for lack of a better word, like juices and stuff, how do you push through that with the same enthusiasm as you would if you were, let's say, inspired? Like, I suppose just if you're going through a stale part of your creative process, like.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I think that happens, right? The way I do it, I saw it's actually I got to work on a project once with Paul Smith, and one of the things I thought was really interesting was something he'd said to students or to young creatives, was to have two boxes for what you do. You've got a box of stuff that's just, you're turning it out, right? And you're not killing yourself on it, and it's making you money. And then you got another box, which is that your stuff that you kind of go, this is the thing that's I'm really into. Like I worked on a project for homelessness, and that was that thing. It was the thing in the box, that the good box, let's say. And that was the one where I remember, like, you know, it's kind of ridiculous, but I stayed up until, I was in the office till I think it's 11:30, just looking at colours, like over and over, to the point I thought I was going to go a bit mad. But I kind of felt it was worth it, because I felt the cause was right. I felt that's something I was passionate about. The client was great. They were all on board. So it was all those things. To me, I see it as like, I have this sort of thing I have in my head. It's like when the stars align. Do you know what I mean? Like if the client is great, there's a bit of budget there, it's something that you feel passionate about, then I go hell for leather with it. But if it's not, if you're just, you know, you're just churning out some kind of crappy ad, I just think you better let it go and save your creativity for something that's much more important, I think. And I don't just mean, you know, maybe ethically, morally, or whatever, but something that you just have a passion for. That's what I would do, because then you can't spread yourself around on everything. You just spread yourself too thin. That's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'd completely echo that. And like, we're not machines, and there's too much of this productivity hype all over the internet. You know, nothing could be further from the truth. We're not machines. Yes, there is an industry. Yes, there's a market, all the rest of it. But the reality is you will need to take breaks, and you'll need to take them often. And as Gerard was just saying there, yeah, you'll have the money jobs, the commercial kind of jobs, but for the real creative stuff, You will have to take time out every now and then and let yourself recharge and reconnect with that playful spirit, or else you'll become a husk, and burnout is the big risk for that, I think, anyway.
So we're going to wrap it up there then. I'll hand it back over to yourself. So thanks again.
Thanks. That was really good. Thank you. So. Okay, that was brilliant. So we're going to go on a big long break now till 2:30. It's now 20 to 2, so we got whatever 50 minutes, which is perfect. Cool. So thanks to the 2 speakers, Gerard and Sarah. That was lovely. It was really interesting. Thanks very much. And yeah, we'll see you after the break. Okay. Okay. Thank you.